Charles II, who survived a civil war and an exile, only to be restored as the King of England, quickly gained the nickname the Merry Monarch. And honestly, why not? He had to celebrate the triumphant return of the monarchy, and what better way to celebrate than with beautiful, stylish women? Mind you, he had a queen, Catherine of Braganza, a Portuguese princess who brought tea, porcelain, and one heck of a dowry. But Charles also had, let's just say, an expanded cast of leading ladies. Teenage first loves, divas, actresses, and even a French spy or two. But if one woman managed to stand out in that crowded cast of characters, it was definitely Nell Gwyn. Okay, pause. We're not dropping the sausage painting just yet. First, we need to talk about how Nell the Orange Girl ended up as royal mistress. Before Nell was royal mistress, she was an actress. And before she was an actress, she was an orange girl who grew up in the slums of London. What was an orange girl? Well, yes, they sold oranges, but back in the 17th century, oranges imported from Spain were exotic and expensive. This wasn't your average fruit stand, it was luxury merch for the theater crowd. And speaking of theaters, Nell worked in Drury Lane, one of the first to reopen after Charles II restored the monarchy and the stage. Remember, theaters had been shut down for years under Puritan rule, so when the king brought back the fun, people flocked in, and the orange girls worked the aisles. But they weren't just walking concession stands. They moved through the crowd, chatted up the guests, and flirted a little. Some sold sweets or perfumes too. And let's just say the oranges weren't the only thing that drew attention. Some became mistresses, and some muses. But one, she became something else entirely. You see, Nell Gwyn had the wit, the charm, and just enough audacity to make herself stand out. So it didn't take long before she caught the attention of Charles Hart, one of the most popular actors on the London stage. He taught her to act and eventually got her on stage as an actress. And there was romance between the two as well. So thanks to him, Nell went from selling oranges to starring in comedies. Yes, comedies, because Nell didn't do a damsel in distress. She preferred bawdy comedies, clever wordplay, and making people laugh. That's how she earned the nickname Pretty, Witty Nell. Audiences loved her. And in those days, the audience included royalty. Because Charles II, he loved the theater. He and his brothers enjoyed going to the theater, so it was only a matter of time until she was on his radar. They reportedly met for the first time at the theater in 1668. Nell was attending a play, and Charles, seated in the next box, spent more time flirting with her than watching the show. Afterward, he invited her to supper, but when the bill came, the king had no money. Neither did his brother. Nell paid and said, "Oz fish, but this is the poorest company I ever was in." It was a direct jab using the king's favorite catchphrase, short for God's flesh, which he was known to toss around with flair. So it sounds like Nell won Charles's heart and she must be moving into the palace any day now? But of course, Nell's rise didn't happen overnight. Becoming a royal mistress wasn't always a romantic story. It was often a calculated move arranged by courtiers with something to gain. And in Nell's case, that was George Villiers, Duke of Buckingham. He had a plan: edge out the most powerful royal mistress at the time, which was Barbara Palmer, who was also his own cousin but now a political liability, and install someone charming, discreet, and unlikely to stir up court politics. Someone who would win the king's heart, someone like Nell. But Nell was no pushover. She supposedly asked for £500 a year to be kept by the king, basically a six-figure salary in today's money, plus suitable lodging, clothes, and other expenses fitting for a royal mistress. Too bold apparently, because Charles initially said no, but not for very long. Now, about the sausage painting. We've seen Nell the Orange Girl, Nell the actress, and Nell the royal mistress. But this painting is something else entirely. On the surface, it looks like a regular old kitchen scene of a young maiden stuffing sausage. But come on, this is 17th century England. Nothing is what it seems, and is loaded with symbolism. First, the dress. It's not a typical maid's attire. It's something you wear behind closed doors in private. Soft linen, off the shoulder, and showing off the asses, if you catch my drift. And then her head is gently tilted to the side with a knowing look. Or is that an inviting look? And then there's the male attendant. A young black attendant is holding out an empty plate, watching her expectantly. But this isn't just a kitchen helper, it's more like a setup. Because here's the wink. Charles II was nicknamed quote-unquote the black boy by his mother for his dark hair and complexion. So in this little domestic scene, is she serving sausages or serving the king? It may look like a humble little portrait, but this was no anonymous kitchen girl, and it wasn't meant for public display either. It was a private joke about a bit of bedroom mischief, and unlike anything we have of other royal mistresses. These look pretty familiar, right? It would take too long to cover all the mistresses of Charles II, so we'll only mention the top 2 divas. We'll also have the most portraits for the purpose of this video. Barbara Palmer was on her way out when Nell arrived on the scene. But in her heydays, Barbara's influence was so great that she was dubbed the uncrowned queen. She was beautiful and of noble birth, but lacked the wealth that would make her a desirable marriage candidate. So once she arrived to court, she went all in with drama and power play, which Charles supposedly found super attractive. She maneuvered her way into great wealth, a royal title, and had Charles under her thumb for years. And her portraits show range, sometimes a commanding Roman goddess, other times a serene Madonna. Barbara knew how to shape her image, but what made her powerful also led to her downfall. And Charles had no shortage of newer, shinier favorites in line to replace her. Soon after Nell arrived to court came Louise de Kérouaille. A French import and of noble birth, Louise was sent to England as a maid of honor to Queen Catherine. But she wasn't just there to fluff pillows. She was intelligent, ambitious, and used her childlike beauty to capture the affection of Charles. Some say she was a spy sent to advance French interests at the English court, and her portraits play the part, projecting an image of soft innocence and classical virtue. Louise was often painted in silks you can almost feel, lounging like a goddess and protected by an angel. Louise may have perfected the image of a royal mistress, but Nell broke that mold. Their rivalry wasn't just personal, it reflected 2 competing versions of femininity, power, and class. Louise may have become the king's favorite in his later years, but Nell held a different kind of place. She made him laugh, challenged him, and kept things light. Her connection with Charles wasn't built on pedigree or politics, it was built on charm, banter, and affection. The rivalry became legendary. Nell was bold and unfiltered, Louise strategic and elegant. Nell famously referred to her as Squintabella, a dig at Louise's small eyes. And when an angry mob once mistook Nell for Louise, Nell leaned out the window and shouted, "Pray, good people, be civil, I am the Protestant whore," to the cheer of the people. Yeah, you can take a guess. Louise was Catholic. Royal mistresses usually fade into the margins of history. Names without faces, whispers without weight. But Nell Gwyn, she didn't vanish. In most of her portraits, she looks every bit the part of a royal mistress. Elegant gowns, dreamy gazes, and the same allegorical flourishes you'll see in paintings of queens. She could play by the rules when she wanted to, but she was never just another face in the royal gallery. But portraits only tell part of the story. Nell bore Charles 2 sons. Only one survived to adulthood, who was given the title Duke of St. Albans. Nell fought fiercely to secure his future. One story claims she dangled him from a window to make the king acknowledge him. The truth of that story hardly matters. What matters is that people believed it. It felt like something Nell would do. Nell died young in her 30s after a series of strokes. But even before that, Charles had made sure her debts were paid. And at his deathbed, he reportedly gave one last order: "Let not poor Nellie starve." For a woman who started life in poverty, it wasn't a bad ending. And this painting, the one of Nell stuffing sausages, it might be the most candid image to survive from Charles II's court. We don't know who painted it, but it stayed in the family, quietly passed down through Nell's descendants for centuries. It never hung in a palace, and it wasn't even made public until 2011. But that makes sense, doesn't it? This portrait wasn't meant for the palace walls, it was meant to be intimate and personal capturing Nell as Nell and showing the kind of mischief that made her unforgettable. Nell Gwyn didn't have the pedigree or the title, but she had heart, wit, and a presence no portrait could fully capture. They called her the people's mistress, and even to this day, somehow she still feels like one. Thanks for stopping by, and see you next time.